Thank you, Ambassador. So you say the issue of weaponization must be pursued,
Absolutely.
but and we've all said Iran has to sit down and come clean for all of the reasons enumerated.
Right.
Yet the head of the IAEA says we're not getting any cooperation from Iran on this.
That's a fair point, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. And you mentioned in your opening statement, Sir, Parchin and the high explosive test site there. There's no question. They have to come clean on all these issues, no question.
But what if they're not forced to come clean? What are the
Well, I mean,
implications of that?
I think there are sanctions in place. I think there are consequences if you're not coming clean. I think that's what the monitoring and verification protocol is all about.
Well, this is the side agreement we're trying to come to an agreement on in terms of this issue to satisfy this issue over weaponization. Of course, anyway, let's go back one point, though, to Mr. Rademacher's key focus on his testimony. The last line of the interim agreement notes that after implementing the final step of the comprehensive solution for an agreed amount of time, then Iran is treated, quote, the same as any non-nuclear weapon state that's a party to the NPT. So I think, Mr. Rademacher, in your written testimony, you said this is a giant get-out-of-jail-free card for Iran, because it means at that point in time, no more sanctions, no more restrictions on procuring nuclear items, no more restrictions on the number of centrifuges it can spin or the level to which it may enrich uranium. At that point in time, under the interim agreement, we've already conceded that whatever the time frame, after that, you treat Iran like you treat Japan or Germany. Completely legitimate. And what does that mean then for verification? What's the consequence? Because it really just is a question of trust, isn't it? I mean, we began with the argument, you know, referring to trust but verify, but it is completely a question of trust if at the end of the agreement everything is lifted and there is no more verification. Mr. Rademacher?
Mr. Chairman, I think you put your finger on what I see as the biggest single verification challenge before us, and that is, it's really a conceptual challenge. The concept of the Joint Plan of Action is that there's this workout period where Iran is to behave, it's to fulfill its obligations, and if they're not caught cheating during that time, then all the limitations come off and they're treated like any other country. And given Iran's track record, the clear evidence that for decades the current government has been in a concerted effort has pursued a concerted effort to develop a nuclear weapon. If they behave for 5 or 10 or 15 years, are we prepared at that point to say, okay, we will let bygones be bygones, and going forward you will be treated like any other country? That's the promise. Now, what I suggest in my testimony is that logically, for the Iranians, that's an incredibly good deal. You know, this is a get-out-of-jail-free card. All they have to do is behave, and then at the so if what they want is a nuclear weapon, you know, they've been struggling. They've been under international sanctions. They've been under restrictions on their ability to import components. It's been a slog for them to get to where they are, and they've been very persistent, and they have stood up this program really only with help from the AQ-CON network. I mean, otherwise they've procured things, but it's all been covert. If they behave for the period of the comprehensive solution, they will be able to move forward with a civilian nuclear program with international cooperation. I mean, that's promised to them in the JPA. And the logical thing for them would be to take that deal, behave, then once the comprehensive solution expires, then very aggressively stand up a far more robust civilian infrastructure than they've been able to stand up now. Go to tens of thousands of centrifuges, much larger quantities of enriched material, and then if they choose to break out do so with a much larger infrastructure in place, with a much larger stockpile of 3.5% enriched material, even 20% enriched material, because once the comprehensive solution ends, they can go back to producing as much 20% material as they want.
One of the arguments made to me by one of the ambassadors, one of the Arab states, was if this comes to pass, and Iran, of course, is continuing its effort to destabilize other countries in the region, and then he listed country by country where they were, you know, from Yemen, where they're trying to topple a government and are very close to doing so, to their efforts throughout the region. When he exhausted all of the examples, he said a regime with that intent, and also having the intent to obtain nuclear weapons capability, you're in danger of leaving them with a hegemon for the region, and with their ambitions intact, both in terms of their capability of this weapon and knowing right now that they can destabilize other regimes, and knowing that when you lift sanctions on them, that's going to be more hard currency that they will use to destabilize their neighbors. The argument he was making, I think, was the veiled threat that other states would then do the same thing, attempt to rush to a nuclear weapon in order to try to offset the aggressive nature of this regime. What do you think this portends for proliferation concerns?
Are you directing that question to me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Rademacher.
Yes. Well, I think we already have some history here that's instructive. In 1995, Iran announced that they wanted to build a civilian nuclear power reactor at Bushehr, and Russia signed a contract with them to help. And for about 10 years, it was the policy of the United States under both the Clinton administration and probably the first half of the Bush administration to oppose that and say, Iran, this oil-rich country, you know, ample energy resources, what do they need a nuclear power reactor for? We need to stop this. And it was a high priority for the U.S. diplomatically to turn off the Bushehr reactor. One of the reasons we wanted to turn it off was because we were afraid it would provide a justification for setting up an enrichment capability to fuel the reactor. And in fact, that's exactly what the Iranians did covertly initially, and then when they were caught, the Natanz facility was revealed. And they justified it because they said they needed the fuel for their reactor. And so then the focus of our diplomatic activity shifted to their enrichment program. And by about 2005, the Bush administration decided to give up in the losing effort to prevent completion of the Bushehr civil power reactor. And I was in the Bush administration at the time. Our talking points changed. We stopped talking about how they shouldn't have a nuclear power plant. And we started focusing just on the enrichment facility. The moment we did that, what happened? Suddenly it turned out a lot of other Middle Eastern countries were interested in having civil nuclear power plants too. Yeah. And 123 agreement was negotiated with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, Jordan, other countries started talking about how they wanted civil nuclear power. Now, I think the Obama administration is proceeding on the assumption that we can change policy again and we can sign off on enrichment in Iran and say, okay, we're prepared to accept an enrichment capability in Iran.
We should learn from past mistakes.
And that the other countries of the region aren't going to immediately, when that happens, say, well, guess what? We need enrichment too.
Right.
And then how do we say, how does the United States say to Saudi Arabia, well, actually, we only trust we only trust Iran to have enrichment. We don't trust you, Saudi Arabia, our ally. We only trust Iran.
My time's
expired. I think it becomes untenable.
I'm going to go, Mr. Engel. Thank you.